Welcome to Checking In with Dr. B, a place designed for live conversations with those who have found and lived their joy. Today I'm speaking with Shenelle Abraham-Ndiaye, who is a mathematician, musician, so many wonderful things, and an amazing educator. Welcome, Shenelle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Now, Shenelle, we were speaking a little bit before, and yeah, I was wondering, mathematics and music, and now education, of course, all go together, but how have you found that sweet spot?
Um, so within my math class, it's weird. So at first I was just incorporating music where they can learn concepts by maybe making a song or just kind of helping to remember concepts. And then after a while, when I started getting my footing in the classroom and really, as a teacher, understanding the mathematical concepts, because I knew how to do the math, I knew broad concepts. But then when you start delving deeper, you figure out like, hey, I can do, I can use music like this, like all those music to like beats per minute and stuff to actually talk about ratios. And then we can use like different rap songs that the kids like and start looking at the different alliterations, all those things, and start counting it and making equations. And is this linear? Is this non-linear? Is this exponential? Like what happens? And it's a slow process, but it is a way that they can just kind of relate a little more rather than us saying, hey, some concept like we went to the grocery and bought like 10 watermelons and did this. But it's more like, oh, I like music. I like to do this. The other day we broke down for statistics, we broke down some of Beyonce's lyrics. And it was talking about like her average word length per song. So, and then we started analyzing different songs, and it was like, well, is this a song that Beyonce may write or sing according to the averages that we get in the word count? And so I kind of moved from just the basic, okay, one, two, three, four, and counts and beats to just more in-depth concepts and relating it to more like higher level math because I will say that was one of my goals in education. I knew how to kind of do some music with math and do the basic music in math, but like how can I use music to convey higher level math, like the algebra, statistical reasoning, and all those things like that. So it's still a process, but we are we are getting there and adding a few more concepts every time I teach a course, adding a couple, one or two more stuff.
Wow, it's wonderful to me, but what in your journey brought you to this point? Because now you've been teacher of the year in Georgia for a number of years. What in your journey? Tell us about the journey to this point.
So I would say um I started teaching in Miami, and I will always say this, my teaching career, I was very lucky. And because I've always ended up with one or two mentor teachers, experienced teachers who helped me along the way. And it was not, and none of my mentors have ever said, this is the way to do it. They more was guiding me like, hey, you like music, start exploring. And the way they phrase questions, they wanted me to become the best version of myself as an educator. And that's why I said I felt like I'm very lucky that in from the beginning of my journey, I had a few teacher mentors that really did that for me. So I was not carbon copy of them, but I was becoming my own self. And then it just happened because I was always trying in this struggle and trying to incorporate music. I'm like, I've done so much music. How can I do it there? And it seems like every time I do something with music, the students like it. And then, so when it's time to do like Teacher of the Year, so I've been Teacher of the Year like 3 times. And so it somehow they seem to always love those lessons. And at some point, and I don't know what it is. I try to find these connections, and it's just weird. Like all my principals always say, I'm not sure why students decide to run in a math class for safe haven. They will they will go, they'll be like, it's lunchtime, and they were like, can I go to math? And everybody's like, can I go to math? Like, do you realize that Miss Abraham is teaching calculus, like pre-calculus? Like, they're like, it's okay. And so I feel like I can't really pinpoint it, but somehow just discussing music and their culture of music and then trying to understand it, incorporate it in my class helped me understand my craft better, connect with them better, and then it flew it like we came over to Georgia, we moved to Georgia, and again it was a big culture shock because I was like, I'm in the United States, but Miami is very different to Atlanta and the music and everything, and but somehow music was just that, was just that connection I was able to have with the students. And so I would incorporate their culture and say, well, hey, teach me about this. And then because now when they teach me about it, even if it doesn't happen in this specific class, I try to incorporate like their culture within the math class at some point, and then I will even reach out and say, "Hey, remember what you taught me like last semester, but I couldn't do it, but I did it this semester, and all my kids loved it." And somehow it's that connection, that using music and trying to incorporate their culture within the class that helped a lot. And it doesn't matter like which state I'm in. I felt like music is that connection.
So you have that universal connection between the students.
Hmm.
And I think it's wonderful that you, as you said, you learn from the students because then that connection becomes even stronger. So right now you're working on your doctorate. How's
Yes.
that come about and where are you going with that?
Um, so it's actually very interesting. It was one of my mentors in Georgia. I was talking with her and she was like, why not? Why don't you go and do your doctorate? And at this point, she was saying you love this culture aspect. And so she told me, check out Georgia State. And then when I looked at the professors, I looked at their work, I would say amazing how they incorporate different aspects of culture within math education. Like my advisor, talks about language and how could we use the different like Black language, this language, and how can we use those like the rules from language to understand the math. Like just in terms of proofs. He gave us this whole thing and he can explain it better than me. But he was showing like how certain cultures they always prove like we always prove in ourselves when we say something and you say, well, how is that? And we prove ourselves through these sets of language. And I never looked at language that way. And then he broke it down and showed how we do the same thing in math and geometric proofs. We just have to now translate that language into the geometry language that is quote unquote standardized for everybody to understand. So, and then you look at like you just look at the work of other professors, and I'm like, you know what? This is a place I really want to be because, again, I felt like our interests are similar in culture, even though we don't exactly study the same thing. We have this ideology of using people's culture um to promote learning. And so that is one of the reasons why I decided to like go for this doctorate and just go with that university because I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be the best version of myself. And I felt like I could get that there. And it has been a long journey, but it has been a rewarding journey because I've been here. This is my third year now, and I feel as if like I've learned so many things about myself that I didn't think I even I even knew about myself. So that is interesting because when I first came in to to do my doctorate, I had said that I was really going to take that Trinidad culture and then try to convert that into how can I use Trinidad culture and maybe like pan music, soca music, and adapt it to understand algebraic concepts. And very interestingly, I went into Georgia State and everybody loved it. And then as taken taken all these classes, I actually turned a slightly different I turned a way different direction, but it's a direction which still would eventually incorporate what I wanted to do initially. So now my area of study is how to use virtual reality as an experiential learning tool to learn math. And where I am going with that is really trying to help figure out how we can use virtual reality to develop experiential learning lessons, but not just generic ones, but culture-based lessons in math education. So even though it's like VR and it's not exactly what I started with, it was like, oh, I could now incorporate like my process is different, but it is something it was, I didn't even think that I was a technology person until I went there. And I'm like, I really got interested into learning about virtual reality and doing all these different lessons. And I was like, you know what? I felt like we could incorporate culture within this, develop, and my hope is to eventually develop these types of culture-based lessons within mathematics to teach I love algebra, so I'll always say algebraic concepts, but different ones like geometry and stuff like that. So that's the direction I'm going. So right now I'm just studying what is out there right now and what is working. So my dissertation is really researching what is working, and then eventually once that process is done, we can go into implementing like I want to develop these types of lessons now.
That sounds so exciting. And especially when you have so many children, as you say, run away from math. Many adults
Yes.
run away from math. Are you utilizing some of these techniques in your classroom as well?
Yes. So I I have. So currently I've done some VR lessons in my class. So the students are very engaged. So sometimes you'll walk into my class and kids are on virtual reality and they are experiencing math, pulling graphs up. So I can see what they're doing on my my little computer, but they're in their headsets and they are doing this lesson. And what's kind of good is that because like those days are differentiated, so you're learning what you are struggling on. So you're getting the experience of, okay, since I'm struggling on this and I can't visualize this, let's use these headsets. So everybody is on a different lesson and they're doing these experiential and and because it's math, it's more interdisciplinary. So you will see like, okay, how is exponential functions used in disease control from the CDC? So that will be like one of them. And or how can I, if somebody's struggling with a concept, maybe rate of change, there's like a lesson with trains and you're a train conductor, and now you have to and so you're like it's an interdisciplinary lessons. And the students really get engaged. But what I like about those lessons, it's not that it's just like, hey, it's a game and you get points, but you're actually basically performing these jobs that you didn't think there was for math. And you're doing it as a high school student, and you're like, oh, this is why I need to do math, because if I was to do this job, then you can do this. If I wanted to do sports and I'm a coach, I do need to figure out angles and how my, and so this is kind of and the questions they ask, they start asking like, okay, why would this angle do this? And I'm like, well, did you try it out and see why we can't do that? Um, and so with those lessons I've tried, and they are very interested. And again, some of the feedback is that they would want it a little more broad. So like meaning like, because VR is so new, it's limited lessons. So it's gonna be something for everybody to know. So we just had, like as I was telling you about the CDC and stuff like that, there's no culture-based stuff, which is where I said I want to develop that. So and so that was one of the feedbacks they were saying. They're like, well, Miss, why can't we use the lessons that you teach in class offline on that VR? Like, why can't we do music producing? Because there was like a lesson that we did on music producing, music production, and we were doing ratios at that point. And they had to figure out how to put these beats together based upon the ratios when you're gonna cut off and they're like, well, why can't we be in a studio doing that on that headset? And so um I so doing I've been doing some version of that, but what I eventually want to develop beyond my dissertation has not been developed yet. So hopefully that can happen after.
So wait now, we have to wait so long? Because it sounds so exciting that, I know students right now, listening to what you are saying, they're struggling in calculus, struggling in pre-calc, would say,
Mhm.
I want this now.
I want this now. I know.
But with your link of music and math, it would seem to be two totally different, well, for some people, it would seem to be two totally different disciplines. How have you brought them together?
Um, Interestingly, I think a lot of people think when you are doing music, as soon as you say math, they start saying, yeah, we count beats and stuff like that. I believe music helped me logically think about math. It's more cognitive than just the application of music. So it's kind of like when I do music, I can't explain. It's like music flows. You get into it, you start thinking, where can I go with this? Like if you're composing, like where can I go with this? How like I want to be extreme. I want a certain sound. So you know what instruments does this, you know what notes does this. And even with math, it's like if I'm tackling a problem, I need to think about all these different variables. And then after, even with an equation can be infinitely long. And you now start figuring out, hey, logically speaking, how large of, not of an impact, but okay, can I remove this variable and you start editing like how you would edit your own music as an arranger. You put down all these ideas, just like here, I will develop like I remember for one of my classes, I developed this big equation. It was beautiful. I'm like, I love this equation. Just like in the panorama process. you go, you play it, and I was like, I love this part. And then one of the judges say, that's too much. It was kind of like the same thing with this, like with the professor. It was like, that is too much. And and the same kind of editing process where I had to go through line by line in my music and arranging, line by line, and say, well, is this really necessary? Is this chord necessary? Yes, I love how the progression is, but does this progression suit what I'm trying to do? And it's the same thinking, that cognitive thinking, that helps me in math. And even when you think about music, music for me, it doesn't just um impact my emotions, but when I close my eyes and I listen, because to me, when I listen to music, I can visualize things. And it's like if I listen to music, I should be able to like visualize a certain setting where it's supposed to be. And it's the same thing with an equation. I will look at an equation and I will just look at it and start thinking like, what does this look like? This setting look like? How does, and so that same visualization process I do in music, I would do that in math. And on a small scale, I try to get my students to do it. So if I give you a small equation, I want you to start trying to use your imagination to visualize, what does this mean? And if I take out this number or if I take out this variable, how does that affect the shape of the graph? Or, for example, if you add this number here, let's say, and let me keep the topic of exponential functions. Like if I'm talking about how much a disease is spreading, if I swap out the numbers, like how does that affect it? Like when we were on mask mandates, like, okay, that affected one of the variables. How did it do it? And so now that same visualization process, you start realizing if you really dig deep in math and you really look at it, it makes sense when you visualize it.
Oh, I love how you create the picture of how that
Yes.
juxtaposition comes together. Now, you're brilliant. And
Thank you.
unfortunately, very often educators aren't given the perhaps recognition in so many ways. What made you go into education? What, and I can see the passion that you have for education. What keeps you there?
I would say initially I got into it because I felt like it was a natural progression. My mom was a teacher for 40 something years. I'm sorry. And I felt like it was a natural progression. And then eventually you start thinking to yourself, how can we don't get appreciated. But I'm sorry. So, but eventually, you have one or two students that come to you and you're like, and when they tell you, Miss, you don't even know what coming to your class means to me every day, that's what keeps us there.
I see, I understand that because you are affecting so many people from this age. I mean, I can across the nation, across the world, education is so important because we're building the foundation of
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the world. You know.
So, and the honestly, for me, students is what keep me there. Um, we don't seem to understand sometimes when students come into your class, what they're going through, how they're going through it. So within education, I will say the connections with your students is what keeps you there. Um, we don't understand how important we are in changing these students' lives. one good teacher, one mentor can change the trajectory of a child's life. And just this week, I remember there was one student, he just burst into my class in tears. And I was just like, what's going on? And he said, you just don't understand, miss, what you did. And I said, what did I do? He said, last year, I was just this student who said, I like math. I want to be an engineer, but I know I'll never be because my grades aren't there. I'm not going to be anything. And he said, you sat down there, you helped me, you worked with me, you told me what clubs to do, you told me how to build my student profile, you helped me with nonprofits to start, you just helped me with so much within that 1 year. And I just got that acceptance letter with scholarship. You just don't understand how you
Oh,
changed my life. And he was in tears. But when he first busted in, I was like, oh my, like you're crying. What's going on? Don't like, because I didn't know early decision came out. So I was like, he was and I was just like, no, I believe in you. We're gonna work on it. And it's amazing to just see just what we can do to impact students' lives. And then one other thing is, I will never forget the impact that my mom had with so many students. She has been retired for so many years, and we still walk around in Trinidad, and people was like, Miss Abraham, Miss, and it doesn't matter what walk of life they're on, they always remember Miss Abraham, who always had high expectations of them. It didn't matter what their grades were before. It didn't matter. My mom never listened to previous reputations, like nothing like that. It's like you walked into her class, it was brand new. She taught you like how she would teach her own children. And everybody remembers Miss Abraham, who had the high expectations for everybody.
that is true. She is an awesome, awesome teacher. And
Mhm.
when you spoke about how your students were looking
Mhm.
at your room as a center, as a place to
Yes,
escape, you're carrying on that tradition.
I always say that I when I am an educator, I would always love to model my mom. And if I achieve even half the educator and person she is, I have been successful because to me, my mom is is the role model. It's like that's the 100% there. So even if I get halfway there, I know I'm a good spot. So I will attribute that to, having a very good role model as a mom, as a teacher. And then always to keep me grounded. Who always is behind the scenes, well, is my dad. You always hear Miss Abraham, but then you have my dad who is always there, the one to ground us because it teaching is hard. There are many days you come home and you feel so defeated. And a lot of times we don't know, I guess we don't say it enough, but the people in the background, like my dad, something like my husband, sometimes there are days I just will come home and just what they offer helps us keep going. And so it's so great to always have those people who always like, want to build you up. And my dad and my husband, one thing they are very good at is they let you have your moment. They will happily sit in the background and be like, we are your support. It's never a fighting for attention. If somebody gets recognized, it's always we there for each other. And they would sit in the background. They're ready to catch us on days that we fall in. And I think that is a very important thing to have to me as a teacher that helps me. a lot because, as I said, you have days that that things feel impossible. And when you have somebody in your corner ready to pick you up and push you up, it really does help you to get up the next day and still give 100%.
That is so true. Having that support is
Mm-hmm,
essential. Really, really. Because you think in the medical field of it's being on all the time, but education,
mm-hmm.
you're on all the time.
All the time.
If now looking at the state of education, say in the United States and globally, especially in high school, what would you like to see?
Um, so to me, this is something that I am constantly asked. And I think just in terms of education, I feel like all I would love to see is the joy coming back into learning. I don't teach elementary, I don't teach middle school, so I teach high school. And somewhere along the line where I'm not saying everybody, but as a majority, the kids come in and they're so excited. And every day they go in the kindergarten, first grade, and they're excited and they come home and they say, I did this today and I did this today and I learned. And they're so excited. And I don't know what happens along that way till when they reach high school where the joy isn't there anymore. And it seems like this is just another task for them to do. Because once you enjoy what you do, you would want to learn more about it. And to me, I tell people, I'm like, simply, I just want the joy back for the students. I want them to be able, which is why when I come in, yes, I will read the standards, but I will always try to adapt it into something that is enjoyable to learn. Um, I think we have reached the phase of such high stakes testing where it is all about the big test. And while we do have to make sure there's some measure to ensure the students are learning, um at some point we have to figure out, how do we balance this? Are we giving them too much to learn in one class? Can we reduce it so that we can do more culture-based, project-based, hands-on, something that will get them more excited? Because when I do 3 activities a week in my class, and on activity days, I don't have to tell my kids, get off your phones. Stop. They're not bored. They're engaged in it. So it shows me, again, we're not saying every single person will be engaged, but it shows that if they have something that piques their interest, we don't as teachers always have to say get off your phones. They're on their phones because they're bored. But we have, again, as teachers, we have to teach the standards, because if not, then there's another test. Then if they don't do good on the test, then it reflects on the teacher. And so now it just becomes such a stressful anxiety. So I just wish within education, somehow policymakers just kind of sit down and start thinking, how can we get the joy back? What happens? What are we doing in the curriculum that makes the joy of learning almost virtually disappear by high school? So, that is just I tell them, I'm like, simply joy. I just want joy within the room.
Yes, bring the joy back into the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, into the students' lives. That's it. If, where do you see yourself, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Um, to be honest, with the hopes of everything being successful with my dissertation, I'm hoping between that 5 and 10 year mark, I would be starting to work on those culture-based experiential learning lessons, which makes the kids way more engaged and love learning. So that is, to me, that's what I would like to happen in 10 years, that once I'm done with this process, I can start impacting by recreating how, like just basically just revamping math education and making it a lot more enjoyable, a lot more relevant, and using the technology that we have at hand right now to do that.
I can't wait for that because that sounds like a project that we can implement across the nation.
Across, yeah. And the biggest hope with that is that if I'm able to do something like that and create a company, it will open up different types of jobs. Like you don't hear a lot of jobs with like ethnomathematicians, the ones who study mathematics through different cultures, or math people who study, I didn't even know people can study math anthropology and so like those, because those are the types of mathematicians I would need on board with me, because it's not about, I know what the standard says, we know what the equations are, but we need to look, we need the math historians, we need the ethnomathematicians, we need those sorts of students who will dig into culture, who will dig into history, who will dig into all these different aspects. And then we start developing lessons that entail those standards. So hopefully if I can do something like that, it will start creating different types of jobs that you don't see on these job markets at all. I don't see these jobs in the market at all.
You don't
Because I
even
would love
hear
to
about,
to to be a math, like an ethnomathematician.
I don't know many people that know there are ethnomathematicians.
So you're right. So that's my hope, because you have a lot of content creators. But again, you just say, hey, this is an equation and this is how we put it in there. But I'm like, no, I need the culture mathematicians. I need y'all who delve into culture, delve into looking at these equations. Like algebra was developed more in like the Middle East and Africa. Like why were they using it? How did this happen? Um, why did y'all even develop algebra in the first place? Like, all these different things that I like. My soapbox is always Pythagoras theorem, which I never call Pythagoras theorem, but it's just kind of like, hey, like they were using it to build pyramids, but then their pyramids in Mexico, were they using the same formula or were they using a different version of the formula? Again, that's where my math historians and my ethnomathematicians will come in, looking at those cultures in Mexico, seeing how they build the pyramid and be like, what version of this formula were y'all using? Because you had the same thing happening in Africa. So were y'all using the same types of formulas? Well, how did it develop? Those are the kind of questions. And then once we get those answers from our ethnomathematicians, our math historians, then we can start developing um, these lessons based upon these formulas, because formulas are just ways that we represent things. So it can be looked at through so many different lenses.
Different
So as I
lenses.
said, I don't want a content creator. I don't want people to delve into the math.
So, for instance, if a young person, someone who's just starting out, and they're hearing you speak about that field, what would they do? How would they become an ethnomathematician or math historian? Historian? How would they do it?
And that's one of the things. I would say, because usually, with math, you just get a general degree. But then once you start branching off, where everybody starts looking at cryptology, this and that, you can start taking different types of classes where it branches you into different things. And then I would say also really researching your university. that is a very, very big aspect that a lot of students don't do. They will just say, "Hey, um, this person, oh, this school is ranked like this, and that." But then you go in there and you realize this that school's culture doesn't fit your interest. And it's not that the school culture is bad, but when it doesn't mix, you don't become the best version of yourself, which was one of the biggest reasons why, when my mentor said, "Hey, I need you to go to this university," I looked into it and I'm like, you know what? This seems like, these professors would have very similar interests to me. And it seems like my ideas and their and that school culture is really intermingled. And it is a very when you can get that match, you become the best version of yourself and you don't feel like you're always like fighting because I can tell you when I went to Florida Memorial, it was like my perfect match. I'm like, yes, I found people with similar ideas and stuff. And then when I did my master's, I did not, the school culture and what I wanted was kind of different, but I still navigated and I learned things. And however, I would say once I got into my doctorate, which is a lot more research, I was like, you know what? I'm glad my mentor said, do your research on the type of university, not just, hey, somebody says this is a good university, apply, but go in and see the type of university. Look at the research, look at your professor's CVs, see if their interest in your department is similar to your interest. Um, and I think it starts from there because once you kind of figure out, hey, I like to do culture, you might not have the specific degree, like mine is in teaching and learning, but I'm able to explore what I want to. So, your degree wouldn't say ethnomathematics, but it will be like, okay, math ed or mathematics. It will say something, and then you get to concentrate, which is what I really liked about Florida Memorial was that yes, I came out with my music degree, but you let me figure out what my concentration in music is, which I really appreciate because a lot of times you go into schools and because the school culture is like this, I'm like, okay, I guess I have to do that. And so, especially I would say somebody who is really into that culture, like into like social justice culture. How can we do this? Really researching and seeing what the university is about because what people don't realize, especially in your graduate degrees, you have the name is a generic name, but once you pair yourself up with these different professors, you get to research what you're passionate about. And I felt like anybody who is getting into like ethnomathematics, it may not come up in a search engine, but you can find universities where you have teachers who are like really into culturally responsive pedagogy and all those different things like that.
Wow. So do your research. That's the important.
Yeah, it's just
Don't
do
go by
your
the
research.
name. Do your research.
Hmm.
Well, it has been wonderful speaking with you. It's so exciting. Is there anything that we have not touched on that you would like to bring to the fore?
Um, right at this moment, I can't really think about anything because I felt like this was such a nice, like relaxing family. Like we just sitting down talking. So I can't even think about like, hey, was this something on a checklist that I had to do? No, so I can't think about anything.
Well, I have enjoyed it, and it's always exciting to speak with you, and I'm excited for the future. I keep saying using the word excited because it is. When you think of how people will benefit from the research that you are
From
doing now,
right.
all the
And I felt like
students.
and I felt like it is a exciting journey, not to just to I love the doctoral process, and I think because it helps you look at what is working and you start researching it, and then you're like, oh well, this may not be working. Um, some professors don't like this to say there's a gap because it's not really a gap, there's limited research in it. And then you realize, hey, this is something I could contribute and make an impact and put my customization, my imprint there. I really love the doctoral process for that. So, which I didn't think 3 years ago when I started this process, I would be here thinking about um creating lessons and potentially creating a company or create I didn't think I wasn't thinking like that. I was just like, I love research, let me do something, and it just opened up so many like ideas, different doors, different opportunities. I as I said, I love the process. It really is eye-opening.
That makes me think of something else because you're teaching, right? So
Hmm.
now you're still in teaching high school, you're working on your doctorate,
Yes.
you have a family. How are you balancing these things? Because each one of those is, a full-time job.
It's Oh, yes. And I'm also a graduate research assistant. So,
Oh.
um, funny enough, I will tell everybody what keep what keeps the balance for me is one, religiously going to church every week, every Sunday, because it keeps me balanced. And also getting my full night's sleep. Everybody is like, how you have so many things to do and you don't? I'm like, I switch off at a certain time and I fall asleep and I'm like, I'm going to get my 8 hours. I don't care if I'm not done with something, I'm getting my 8 hours. And it has worked. It has worked to make sure that I'm seeing about my spiritual health, my mental health, um, just ensuring for me, once I was there realizing I was balancing so many things, and then I prioritized my spiritual and mental health. That really helped a lot. I cannot tell anybody how miraculously I get everything done, but with still getting all this sleep and making sure I don't miss anything from church and stuff. But once I figured out making sure I balance that and prioritizing my mental health, and spiritual health, everything else fell in place. I don't, as I said, I don't know how. It just, it's just like I have a million things to do, but somehow because I'm able to keep a sound mind, I'm not panicking too much. I'm not wasting time doing this. I'm able to because I'm getting my sleep, my 8 hours, I'm able to concentrate. And if I say I'm gonna study for a solid 3 hours, some people may study 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm like, I only got 2 hours. I get through a lot. I can get through a lot of journal articles. I can get through so many things because, again, my mental health, my physical health, my everything health, like prioritizing me in that way helped me balance everything. And somehow, because everything is in balance and in equilibrium, when it's time to do these tasks, I get it done quicker and I get it done thoroughly.
So your research area of math is working in your life too, because you're balancing all sides of the equation.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. It takes discipline to
Yeah.
to really make
It
sure.
does. But and as I say, like just doing that, like the wonders, you know, I've never sat down and really thought about like mental health and spiritual health um in this way, but the wonders that it did in helping me keep balanced. Because when I first started, I was just out of sync when I first started. It was just kind of like, okay, I can't get all this sleep. I need to stay up all night and do this. And then I realized I'm like, I'm reading this same article like 10 times because I'm tired. And then I'm like, you know what? My mentor again said, hey, you need to get sleep. Make sure you sleep. Make sure you don't miss church. Make sure you don't. And then I'm like, are you crazy? How am I going to get this done? But it's funny enough, you do it, you prioritize it, and then you realize everything else falls in place.
And that, I think, is the essence because you have to keep yourself firm and in balance. Well, Chanel, this has been a lovely conversation. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for, I know how busy your life is.
Oh no, definitely, definitely. It is a pleasure and an honor.
Uh, Thank you. And I'm looking forward, as I said, to when your business is up and running and all the people who are running away from math will be running to math,
Tuna.
all the musicians. Uh, well, take good care, and I hope to see you again soon. Hope to speak with you again soon.
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely you'll be hearing from me soon.
Good. Thank you. Welcome to Checking In with Dr. B. In addition to our video podcast, we invite you to join our Jumpstart network at keepyourjoyandrise.com. There you'll have access to questions and answers with our guests, virtual meetups, and opportunities to suggest and participate in workshops and spur of the moment talk and jam sessions. We are creating a community of positive thinkers and doers. Come join.